They didn't reach out to ESPN. They didn't contact Turner or the networks that helped build the WNBA. Instead, they made one call, to Caitlin Clark. At just 22 years old, she isn't simply the most recognizable figure in women's basketball anymore. She has become the strategic centerpiece reshaping how the entire sport operates. NBC's decision to place her at the forefront of its basketball revival is no coincidence. At a moment when the WNBA is dealing with instability, labor disputes, and uncertainty surrounding future seasons, Clark has already locked in visibility, income, and influence that stretches far beyond the hardwood. This move represents far more than a standard media agreement. It's a declaration that the power structure and storytelling authority within women's basketball has fundamentally shifted. The real question now is straightforward. Who else in the league commands this level of leverage, and how far will Clark take it? NBC's intentions are crystal clear. They aren't quietly easing Caitlin Clark into a minor role or testing her appeal on a low-stakes broadcast. They are placing her at the heart of the most ambitious basketball project the network has launched in decades. On February 1st, Lakers vs. Knicks at Madison Square Garden, Clark will make her debut as an NBC analyst. It's difficult to imagine a higher-profile NBA regular season matchup. LeBron James and Anthony Davis facing a surging New York Knicks team in the world's most iconic basketball arena, within the largest media market in the country. And right in the center of that production, NBC is positioning a 22-year-old WNBA star who has never before worked as a professional television analyst. She returns again on March 9th for Thunder vs. Knicks, marking two of the most compelling matchups on the NBA schedule. These appearances aren't symbolic. They are evaluations. Two opportunities to prove whether her influence extends beyond playing and into broadcasting. Two moments that will decide whether this partnership becomes a long-term cornerstone or a cautionary experiment. What makes this decision truly bold is the company she will keep on set. Clark will sit alongside Maria Taylor, one of the most respected voices in sports media. Carmelo Anthony, a future Hall of Famer who defined an era of NBA scoring. Vince Carter, widely regarded as the greatest dunker the game has ever seen. Tracy McGrady, an offensive genius whose scoring ability bordered on art. Reggie Miller, one of the most clutch shooters in basketball history. This is not a trial run. This is NBC making a full commitment, placing Clark shoulder to shoulder with legends and betting that she belongs there. This move coincides with the launch of Basketball Night in America, NBC's answer to the wildly successful Football Night in America franchise. And at the core of that launch, they have chosen a WNBA player still early in her career. The message could not be more direct. NBC does not see Caitlin Clark as merely a women's basketball star. They see her as a basketball star, full stop, and they are willing to stake the future of their basketball brand on that belief. So why is NBC making this bet? Because the data leaves no room for doubt. When Caitlin Clark entered the WNBA, the league's entire ecosystem changed almost instantly. The Indiana Fever transformed from an afterthought into appointment television. Attendance surged across multiple markets. Television ratings shattered expectations executives had long abandoned. Merchandise demand exploded beyond what existing systems could support. A single player altered the financial trajectory of an entire professional league. NBC observed all of it. They tracked Peacock subscription spikes when Clark's college games moved behind a paywall. They analyzed social media engagement numbers that rival and often surpass those of established NBA stars. They reviewed demographic data showing she attracts audiences traditional basketball coverage rarely reaches. The conclusion was simple. Wherever Caitlin Clark goes, viewers follow. And NBC wanted her on their platform. Sam Flood, NBC's executive producer, described her as one of the most captivating and dynamic scorers in basketball, carefully choosing language that removes gender from the equation. That wording is intentional. It signals exactly how NBC plans to position her. She is not being framed as a novelty or a diversity checkbox. She is being presented as someone with elite basketball intelligence who can communicate that knowledge to an audience hungry for real insight. For NBC, this is also strategic insurance. If the WNBA season is delayed or disrupted due to collective bargaining negotiations, Clark remains embedded in their NBA coverage. If the season proceeds as planned, NBC already has the league's biggest star integrated into its broadcast infrastructure, strengthening its position for future WNBA rights negotiations. And if Clark proves to be as natural on camera as she has been under pressure throughout her playing career, NBC may have just secured a media figure capable of carrying basketball programming for the next 20 years. The Michael Jordan comparison is compelling, but it leaves out a crucial distinction. When NBC featured Jordan in its coverage, his role was largely ceremonial. He was there to generate excitement and lend legacy credibility, not to provide structured analysis or appear on a consistent schedule. Caitlin Clark's situation is fundamentally different. Her involvement comes with designated games, defined responsibilities, and a seat on an established panel where she is expected to contribute real basketball insight. Even more significant, she is doing this while still an active player, offering a perspective that retired analysts simply cannot replicate. This is where the story becomes far more complex. The WNBA's collective bargaining agreement is set to expire in October 2025, and players have already begun publicly discussing the possibility of sitting out the 2026 season if their demands are not met. They are pushing for higher salaries, improved travel standards, expanded rosters, and a larger share of the revenue their work generates. These demands are not unreasonable. The league's value has grown rapidly, yet player compensation has lagged far behind that growth. What Caitlin Clark has just demonstrated, however, changes the negotiating landscape entirely. She has secured alternatives that do not rely on the WNBA season moving forward as planned. Consider what she already has in place. Her Nike deal alone represents generational wealth, complete with a signature shoe and endorsement package that places her in an elite financial tier. She remains visible and compensated through USA basketball commitments, including World Cup qualifying events in March. And now, the NBC partnership extends into May 2026, providing media income that most WNBA players could scarcely imagine. If the players' union chooses to hold out, if the 2026 season is delayed or even canceled, Caitlin Clark is insulated from the financial strain that would affect much of the league. She can afford patience. She can support a work stoppage without worrying about immediate financial survival. That reality creates a fundamental difference between her incentives and those of players occupying the middle and lower tiers of WNBA rosters. She has already secured what many players are still fighting to obtain: mainstream visibility beyond the league, financial stability independent of a CBA, and a media career launching while she remains in her athletic prime. That reality raises an uncomfortable but unavoidable question. How aggressively will she fight for collective bargaining gains that primarily benefit non-superstars when she is already operating within an entirely different economic universe? This does not suggest that she would undermine the union or cross a picket line. But it does mean that when negotiations become difficult, when sacrifices are required for collective progress, her personal calculus is different, and everyone involved understands that. Which brings us to another question. Why not ESPN? ESPN has been the primary broadcast partner of the WNBA for years. They have invested heavily in women's basketball coverage and built a stable of analysts with long-standing relationships across the league. They represent the institutional authority of sports media. Yet when the opportunity arose to bring the biggest star in women's basketball into a major analyst role, either ESPN failed to make a compelling offer or Caitlin Clark deliberately chose another path. NBC, by contrast, is the challenger. After years away from basketball, they have reclaimed NBA rights and are rebuilding their basketball identity from the ground up. Basketball Night in America is not an extension of an existing product. It is a launch. Being part of that foundation gives Caitlin Clark a level of ownership and influence that joining an established ESPN program never could. There is also the Peacock factor. NBC's streaming platform has become home to premium sports content, including exclusive NFL games that have drawn massive audiences. If Basketball Night in America evolves into a flagship Peacock property and Clark is embedded from the beginning, She positions herself at the center of how younger audiences consume sports media. That is a forward-looking strategy that traditional broadcast models struggle to match. She is not choosing safety. She is betting on herself, and on a platform that is betting just as heavily on her. Every time Caitlin Clark speaks on an NBC broadcast, she represents far more than her own career. She stands for every woman who wants to be taken seriously as a basketball analyst. She embodies the argument that WNBA players understand the game at an elite level. She carries the burden of challenging spaces historically reserved for men. That weight is immense and deeply unfair. Male analysts are judged solely on individual performance. They are not asked to validate an entire gender's right to participate. Yet, fair or not, that is the reality Clark steps into. If she delivers thoughtful, sharp analysis that deepens how viewers understand the game, it strengthens the case for women in basketball media and opens doors for others. If she appears hesitant, generic, or overwhelmed alongside Carmelo Anthony, Vince Carter, and Tracy McGrady, it risks reinforcing stereotypes that will take years to dismantle. There is no neutral outcome. Every appearance will be dissected. Every comment will be interpreted through a broader cultural lens. That pressure exists on top of the challenge of live television in front of millions. The encouraging part is that pressure has followed her for most of her life. She has been the focal point since high school, the target of relentless scrutiny, physical defenses, and non-stop media attention. Sitting at a desk discussing basketball may be different from playing under bright lights, but it is arguably less demanding than what she has already endured. Still, broadcasting is its own skill set, and no one truly knows how they will perform until the cameras are on and the moment arrives. The hopeful scenario is the one NBC is clearly wagering on. The network believes Caitlin Clark's WNBA career and her emerging media career can exist side by side, strengthening one another rather than competing for attention. The idea is simple. Fans tune in to hear her break down NBA games, then follow that interest into the WNBA season when she returns to the court. It creates a continuous loop of visibility. Caitlin Clark discussing basketball on NBC keeps the sport in the public conversation year-round. It keeps her name in front of casual fans during the off-season, when women's basketball typically fades from mainstream focus. When the WNBA season eventually begins, whether that is May 2026 or later, she brings a portion of that audience back with her. Every appearance she makes on an NBC broadcast serves as a built-in promotion for women's basketball, reaching viewers who might never actively seek out WNBA coverage on their own. Her basketball intelligence should translate seamlessly across leagues. The fundamentals are universal. Reading defenses, understanding spacing, anticipating actions before they unfold. Those skills do not change based on gender or league. Throughout her career, Clark has shown an ability to process the game at a level few players ever reach. Turning that vision into analysis is largely about communication, and she has consistently demonstrated an ability to explain complex ideas in ways fans can understand. If NBC handles this correctly, they will give her space to be authentic. Let her talk about the game the way she experiences it. Let her offer insight from the perspective of someone actively competing at an elite level, not someone recalling moments from years ago. The value she brings is not repetition. It is originality. She can say things no one else can because she is living a basketball reality no one else on that panel is living. But there is a less comfortable possibility that cannot be ignored. If the WNBA season is delayed or canceled due to labor negotiations while Caitlin Clark appears weekly on television discussing NBA basketball, some fans will view that as a betrayal. The criticism will be that she should be using her platform to advocate for WNBA players, not expanding her personal brand through coverage of men's sports. That argument may be unfair, but it will surface. And if a prolonged dispute creates financial strain for players while she continues to thrive on NBC, resentment could begin to grow inside the league itself. The optics are difficult in working conditions is not an easy image to manage. There is also the risk that her media presence begins to overshadow her playing career. That she becomes known first as an NBA analyst who happens to play in the WNBA, rather than the other way around. That the women's game loses its most powerful star to broadcasting before she reaches her full potential on the court. NBC would have no issue with that outcome. They would happily build their basketball identity around her regardless of where her playing career leads. For the WNBA, however, that could represent a loss. The league herself as an analyst. We are watching a live experiment in the future economics of women's basketball. We are seeing whether WNBA stars can build mainstream media careers while still actively competing. We are watching NBC place a multi-year bet that the Caitlin Clark phenomenon is durable, scalable, and valuable enough to anchor major programming. Lakers versus Knicks at Madison Square Garden. LeBron James. Anthony Davis. The most iconic arena in American sports. And Caitlin Clark at the desk, attempting to prove that her perspective belongs alongside Hall of Famers who have experienced every level of the game. If she succeeds, if she delivers insights that elevate the broadcast and reshape how viewers see the game, this becomes the opening chapter of a media career that could last decades. It becomes proof that elite women's athletes can cross into mainstream sports media without stepping away from competition. It becomes a blueprint others will follow. If she falters, if the moment overwhelms her or the format does not suit her strengths, the consequences cut the other way. It becomes a warning. Influence in basketball or reshapes expectations in unexpected ways, the outcome will echo long after the final buzzer sounds.